Good evening. Our society is set up for at least two people to experience the same thing at the same time. Ever walk into a restaurant and ask for a table for one? Did you feel uncomfortable? Probably, because our social expectations put pressure on those who find themselves alone at restaurants, at the movies, and most certainly on vacation. Try to take a cruise alone. Not only will you feel like the odd man or woman out, but you'll pay a premium as well. As a result, many single people who dream of seeing the world or just going to Carowinds don't, because they won't go alone. That hesitancy can severely limit your life experience, but it doesn't have to. Our guest tonight was forced to go on a vacation by herself, and though she hesitated, decided to do it. The experience changed her life. She's hooked. Now, Gastonia's Janice Holly Booth does it all the time. She spells out this rather unusual point of view in a new book, and she'll do it for us when we come back. You know, going places by yourself does not have to be unpleasant. In fact, it can have the very opposite effect, and you can find out things about yourself that you never knew. Now, I know that because I read our guest's book, Janice Holly Booth's book, Only Pack What You Can Carry. And she joins us now. It's her personal story of finding freedom in being alone. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you with us. You're from Gastonia, or at least you are now. You're originally from Canada, but you're from Gastonia now.
Lived there 14 years now.
But most of your traveling experience has not been in Gastonia. It's been way out west, which we'll talk about. The subtitle of your book is My Path to Inner Strength, Confidence, and True Self-Knowledge. But you're the kind of person, at least according to your book, that has always had self-confidence.
Well, not always.
You were headstrong as a child, I know that.
And my poor parents, I apologize to them in front of the world here, but when I was a kid, I really just didn't feel like anything could go wrong. I felt indestructible, and probably like most kids. But then something happened to me. I think something happens to all of us as we get older, and we start to worry about what might happen. We might get hurt, we might get lost, we might be afraid, and so little by little we stop doing things. Mm-hmm. And that's what had happened to me. It finally got to the point where I realized that fear was making my decisions for me. And so I made a decision to rail against that, and that's how this whole thing started.
Yeah, you were running a major organization in Gaston County, and they were sending you to a conference, and you wanted to go out early to Utah for the conference. And experience some things that you'd always wanted to experience. What was it? It's called canyoneering. What's it called?
Canyoneering in slot canyons.
In slot canyons. And you could not get anyone to go with you. They thought you were crazy.
They did, and well, they were right. But it was a dream I'd had since I was 17 years old. Living in Canada, I had seen a picture of a slot canyon. Never seen anything more mysterious or beautiful in my life.
These are deep, 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 deep crevices in the earth?
Right. If you take the Grand Canyon and you squish it together at its most beautiful place and maybe make it 30 feet wide at its widest and maybe 5 feet at its narrowest, and then very, very deep and labyrinthical. And
how deep?
It can be 100 feet, it can be 1,000 feet, it can be 10,000 feet.
You don't know.
You don't know. You don't know when you're looking over the edge. So,
well, no wonder people said you were crazy.
But I had dreamed for more than 20 years of seeing one with my own eyes. And when the Girl Scouts, that was the organization I was running, sent me out to Utah for a conference, I added 4 or 5 days onto it, and I thought, oh, there are going to be all these people who want to go with me. They're going to be lined up, knocking on the door, wanting to go. And that's how I started traveling alone.
At first you thought to yourself, no, maybe they're right, maybe I better cancel, and you were on the phone about to cancel, and you thought to yourself,
I am running an organization that is supposed to be inspiring girls with courage. And I thought to myself, Janice, if you cancel this trip, you are the biggest hypocrite alive. So I went on the trip, and it truly changed my life.
How so?
Well, up until that point, I hadn't realized how stingy I had been with solitude, my own solitude. Everything I did, I either did with somebody else, or it involved a sport where I was involved with another person. I hadn't really taken a big chunk of time just for myself. It was such a beautiful revelation. And I remember getting into the southern Utah landscape. And Mike, every time I would come around the corner in the car, I would stop the car and go, oh. And then I would go around the next corner and I would stop the car and go, oh. And this continued for hours. And I remember at the time thinking, if I was with somebody, how long would this last? They'd be so frustrated. They'd be, well, we've got to get here, we've got to get there. And so I was able, in my solitude, to experience every new thing, every moment.
At your speed.
At my speed, and deeply. I didn't have to pull myself out of it to say something to somebody.
But on the other hand, weren't there moments when you wanted to share what you were looking at with somebody, or just compare notes with somebody?
I get asked that a lot. Don't I miss sharing with somebody? And I think that devalues our own worth. Aren't we worthy of sharing that moment with ourselves and only ourselves? I just have not had that problem.
So what do you say to people who think that this sounds a little selfish?
Well, it's selfish for sure, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we spend our whole lives doing for others. We do for our employers, we do for our partners, our spouses, our children, and there's a little morsel of time we give ourselves. And so yes, it's selfish, but I think that's great.
And this opened the floodgate. This was not just a one-time experience.
Right.
It opened your eyes and opened the floodgates. Do you choose now, and we'll talk about some of the things you've done, but do you choose now specific places to go and things to do because you can do them and will do them by yourself?
Absolutely. And I try to find things that really resonate for me. A lot of people think that I'm addicted to the adrenaline rush, and I'm actually not. I'm a big chicken. I don't even like cold water when I'm brushing my teeth. So I try to find something that is going to have a lasting memory or a lasting impact on my life, the way that slot canyons did. It was the fulfillment of a dream. I had a bad riding accident in 1996. It made me afraid to ride. So I went to Ireland and did some cross-country jump training, which is just about the scariest thing you can do on horseback. So I try to pick things that will push me outside of the place where I'm comfortable, but also have real resonance in my life.
And you do them with training. I want to point this out because slot canyoning is really very dangerous. And you got training, and in that first training session that you went to, there were two other people who were there, again, by themselves.
Yes. Yes, we all converged in southern Utah. We had the same guide. We spent 3 days in the canyon learning how to be safe, learning all of the knots, all of the techniques. And then when it was over, we dispersed.
But do you do the actual canyoneering by yourself? Or because I saw 127 hours. I'm not cutting off my arm.
I'm not either. I'm not either. But no, if a canyon, there are slot canyons that are not technical. They don't require ropes. You can walk into them and walk out of them. Those are fine. If it's a technical canyon and it requires the use of harness and ropes, I'm taking a guide or I'm taking somebody else with me.
So that they can be there in case as a
so
backup.
They can cut my arm off for me. Because I'd faint,
Now, as a result of taking all these trips, this book is the result of that, but the book came out of the fact that you began compiling your own thoughts on these trips, and you came up with 4 key essentials to life's journeys, which came after several of these trips alone. But before we talk about those, what were you getting out of these trips at the time? Because this all emerged after the fact. This didn't happen all at once, these 4 key essentials.
It didn't happen all at once, but Mike, I keep very detailed travel journals when I travel for lots of different reasons. One is very selfish. I can pull a travel journal from 10 years ago out, read it, and I feel like I'm there again. But they did form the foundation for the stories that I tell in the book. And I realized that over time, through reading my travel journals, my outlook on life was changing. It was morphing into something different. And I wasn't really sure what it was until I started writing the book.
Yeah, you've told me that, a lot of authors have told me this, that they don't know what they think until they write. And suddenly these thoughts emerge and you go, that's exactly what I think. Yeah. You've already talked about one of the key essentials. You've mentioned it briefly, and that is solitude. A lot of people really don't like to be alone. It makes them nervous. They feel depressed because there's nobody around to talk to. What is the benefit of solitude? Why is it so attractive to you?
Well, it's because it allows me to move into the other essentials, which I know we're going to talk about. But it gives me space. It takes me away from the clutter of my day-to-day life. It takes me out of all of this clanging that's going on in my head, worrying about work, worrying about the mortgage, all of that. It allows me to think really clearly about things I need to be thinking about. Next steps in my life, deciding what it is that fills me up and what doesn't fill me up. And it's only in solitude that we have time to really go deeply into those thoughts.
I mean, it seems to me you're asking and getting answers to, in some cases, some big questions, some very big, life's big questions. Isn't that scary? Because maybe you don't like the answer.
It is scary, but I'll tell you, everybody is going to have to go through it at some point. Better to do it now when we have a chance to change our trajectory than to be at the end of our days and realize I should have gone that way instead of this way, and then not being able to do anything about it. I think that's the more horrible scenario.
In that solitude, coming to that conclusion is the next of life's key essentials, and we'll find out what that is when we come back with Janice Holly Booth.